I'm Catherine Lyle Watson and I'm the writer of Motherland. Motherland was gifted to me by Elena Volkova, a Russian researcher. She came to me and she said, did I know the story of the Brisbane woman who married the exiled Russian Prime Minister Alexander Kerensky? Now, I'd never heard about that, and I found it rather far-fetched to imagine someone from Brisbane marrying an exiled Prime Minister and saving him from the Nazis in World War II, but it all turned out to be true. So that was enough to get me going, and over the next 4 years I researched and found out everything I could about Nell Tritton and Alexander Kerensky. What struck me most was that Nell had been forgotten from the pages of history. It seemed that there were books and books written about her husband, but nothing about her. She warranted maybe a paragraph here and a page in this one, but like many women, she just disappeared from our memories. There was one place where Nell came to life, and that was in a book by another Russian, a Russian poet and writer, Nina Berberova. And in Nina's book, she had a section where she talked about her friendship with Nell and Kerensky. And the way she described Nell struck me as being completely different to the way she described anybody else in her book. Nell came to life when she described the tendrils of hair that curled and came loose behind her ears, her delicate and long tapering fingers. She described her as having a bosom like Anna Karenina. All of this piqued my interest as a writer and made me think there was something more than just a normal run-of-the-mill friendship between the two women. And so I began to dig a little bit more deeply. And I found out a whole lot about Nina, which was fascinating, because she'd written some deathbed dialogues which were never published, but which are held in an archive in America. And they describe her as having two sexes, a woman who loved women and who loved men. And this freed me to go everywhere I'd imagined in the play and to take it from revolutions, World War, the bits of history we knew about, but also into a beautiful, intimate relationship that wasn't accepted by society in the times when those women lived. So Motherland is a sweeping play. It's epic. It covers a century in time. It covers 3 different continents. It's about 3 real women. It's also highly theatrical. So when Caroline Dunphy directed it, she took the idea and she wanted to make sure that it didn't become a staid historical piece, but that it was contemporary theatre in its truest form. So it's a play where all the actors are on stage the whole time. It's choreographed almost like a dance, sweeping and swirling around the stage. And the actors play multiple characters. They come in and out of scenes and out of times, making it a really exciting and dynamic piece of theatre. For audiences, we found that the play attracted people of all ages and from all sorts of backgrounds. We had audiences of retirees coming from retirement homes in groups and booking out the theatre, coming because they were fascinated by the history, but then they were completely engaged by the way that the play was shown and told. We also found that it struck a chord with students. We had grade 12 students come to the play and university students, and they were captivated by the story and the contemporary telling and playing of it. Our audiences ranged from 13 years old was the youngest, which I think is probably a bit too young, and went all the way through to a 93-year-old woman who just loved it. For me, as a writer, one of the most magical moments for me was at the end of one of the performances, when a woman came up to me and she was crying. She'd been weeping during the play, and she came and said that she had never been to the theatre before. This was her very first experience, and her face just lit up, and she said, "I was right there. I was there with them," and that for me was just magic. So someone who'd never been to theatre, who knew nothing about it, could be captivated and transported to another time and another place. And that's kind of the magic of what theatre can do. Okay, if you can cut there. One of the things audiences found exciting about Motherland was the way that it combines Australian history and European history. So we go from the Fitzgerald Inquiry in Brisbane all the way back to the Russian Revolution and World War II. So there's this feeling of catching up with the migrant experience of coming to Brisbane, coming to Australia and being a foreigner, and also the experience of Australians travelling overseas. There's a local feeling combined with a national and international stage. I'm stopping there because I hated that. As well as the historical stories in Motherland, there's a more contemporary story, a migrant story, about a Russian woman coming to Brisbane with her husband and her son. Now, her husband was a Brisbane businessman, and she arrives here thinking that she's going to have the best of both worlds, Brisbane and Moscow. But within 2 weeks of arriving here, her husband's business goes bankrupt due to the Fitzgerald Inquiry, and she's suddenly embroiled in police investigations and corruption. So the play manages to mix World War II, the Russian Revolution, and contemporary Queensland politics. It brings modern-day Australia and old world Europe together and marries them with poetry and cafe society and turmoil, all in one very fast-paced 90-minute dramatic interlude.